Mark, the bottom line is Iowa right now, yeah, they went 10-4, but they're not playing complimentary football. Like, you can't have one of the worst offenses in the FBS and claim that you're playing complimentary football. And that's what Kirk Ferentz wants to do. That's why the offensive issues should be maddening to Kirk Ferentz. I mean, and maybe they are. Maybe they are. Maybe he's just putting on a front in front of the news media. I don't see, when I listen to Kirk talk, I don't see a coach who's absolutely, and you should be fed up. I mean, you have to be able to rein it in, right? But you should absolutely be fed up with the fact that our offense isn't better. And maybe he is. I just don't see it when I hear him talk. I think he knows it needs to be better, but man, to be 123rd or whatever it is in total offense in the country, you're not. There's no way you can stake the claim that you're actually playing complementary football, that your offense is complementing the defense and vice versa. It's just not happening. It's not fair. It's not fair to Phil Parker, and it's not fair to the defense. It's not fair to any of the players, the offensive players or defensive players, because they deserve better.
The one aspect that isn't taken into account in terms of offensive productivity by that number is turnovers. And I don't know where they ranked last year in regards to turnovers, because if they could, if they could high in a sense of being highly ranked because they don't turn the ball over. Okay. Yeah. So that's one aspect of that. I can see Iowa, because of certain recruiting limitations, playing a better brand of football that should result in more championship contention on a regular basis if they're producing a top 50 offense. Not that they should settle for that, but if it's a top 50 offense with limited turnovers, then that is playing complementary football to a great defense and special teams.
And I should let me rephrase what I said. It's highly ranked in the sense that of turnover margin. Okay. I think Spencer Petras, I had to look back at the stats. I believe he threw 8 or 9 interceptions this year. We didn't fumble the ball a lot, but I think Iowa was probably middle of the pack offensively in turnovers. I don't want to say they're towards the top. They were probably middle of the pack. But in turnover margin, as you know, Mark, the story nationally, the first 6 weeks? Remember when we were 6-0 and Iowa was on top of the world, Mark? Do you remember that when they were number 2 in the country? What did you think about that, Mark?
I do. I had them number 1.
That was a ranking that made sense based on their resume at the time.
Yes.
Because we perceived the Indiana win. We perceived the Iowa State. The Iowa State win was still a really good win. I think we'd agree it was a very good win to win that game on the road. But it was a 7-6 Iowa State team. It was a 2-10 Indiana team. The win against Penn State, that ended up being a 7-6 Penn State team.
Okay. So I went to my trusty site right here, which ranks not turnover margin, offensive turnovers.
Okay.
So, for example, Colorado. Now, there may be some defense to Kirk Ferentz and the argument that he's making. Colorado had an abysmal offense. I believe they had the worst yardage output in the nation, at least in the Power 5. They had the least number of turnovers in the nation with 7.
Seriously?
Yes, they only had 7 turnovers. They threw 3 interceptions. Now
that's called being risk adverse to a fault. That's what that is, Mark.
Lost. Yeah, it probably is. And
that's Iowa's problem. You could argue.
And that's either, and Colorado doesn't come close to Iowa when it comes to expectations or status in college football. But that could be being risk averse because you have to be, that they evaluate themselves to be that porous on offensive talent, or that they're risk averse and they're paying the price for it by not producing points.
Yeah, I think you hit that on the head. I mean, again, I know that's anecdotal evidence. That's just one example. But yeah, I mean, and let's be honest, a perfect example of that, Mark. Perfect example of that. Iowa's down, I believe, and I'm spitballing this, 20-3 in the fourth quarter against Wisconsin. Iowa's in Wisconsin territory, like the 40, and it's 4th down and like 10, I think. Maybe it might be more than like 4th and 15. Yeah. What does Spencer Petras do? Do you remember?
No. I'm just waiting for it.
He chucks the ball about 20 yards out of bounds on 4th down and 10.
Oh, I do remember that play. I was pulling my hair out. I do remember that play.
I mean, that I don't even understand what to say. I don't even know what to say in that situation. I just
You would rather have your quarterback chuck the ball straight up in the air and have it picked off or
yes,
pick six
yes,
because
absolutely.
you,
You'd rather a pick six. You'd rather a pick six, Mark, because at least it shows that you know what's going on. You throw the ball out of bounds. We don't know if you know what's going on. That's the problem. Oh,
do you know what team was 10th in the nation in turnovers, meaning in a good sense, the least number of turnovers? And I'll fill in the blank by just saying offensively, I think number one in the nation in scoring and yards per game. Ohio State was only 10th in the nation in turnovers. They didn't turn the ball over that much.
yeah. Well, but I think you could attribute some of that to just exceptional talent, Mark. Is that fair? That you can produce exceptional talent and exceptional coaching, because you can coach discipline and fundamentals, but you also have the talent to be absolutely explosive on offense.
I don't know why this list doesn't go past 50, because according to this, Iowa is worse than 50th. I don't see them in the top 50.
Well, let's keep in mind that Spencer did get in some trouble. I mean, we're talking the first 6 to 7 games. I mean, there were almost no interceptions for Spencer Petras. He may have thrown his first interception against Colorado State. I think that's accurate. But then he had like 4 against Purdue. I know they had at least 2 turnovers against Wisconsin. He had at least 2 interceptions might have had 3 against Kentucky. So there were just a few games here and there, and those were obviously the games where Iowa killed themselves. But in the games that Iowa won, Iowa protected the ball really well. And that is, I mean, we know how important turnovers are. I am shocked by the stat that you gave me about Colorado. I mean, again, you could say it's being risk adverse to a fault, but man, that's a mind-boggling stat. As bad as Colorado was for them to be that high in that category.
Am I just missing Iowa? Anyway, I will get back to you because I'm searching for Iowa on this list. Where are they?
While you're doing that, Mark, let me get to this question. Oh, where'd it go? Okay, John says, if you had to guess who is starting at quarterback on September 3rd, you will probably remember, John, as we were getting ready for the Citrus Bowl, the media made this big deal about who was the starter. Do you remember that, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought it was ridiculous. I mean,
I remember that.
Nothing against the Iowa media. A lot of those guys do a great job, but I thought it was ridiculous. And I said the whole time, Spencer Petras is a starter. We can twiddle our thumbs all we want on this. I'm not going to go that far here because there's so much. I mean, there's spring ball, and of course injuries happen, and you just never know. But certainly, I would have to give Spencer the nod at this point. I would just, again, given how Iowa wants to play, given track record with how Iowa evaluates quarterback play. I don't know how you could go. I mean, you can't go Labus. Is anybody going to sit here and say, yeah, it's Labus? Like, who's going to say that? What are you, based on what? Just hype? I mean, maybe it'll happen, but nobody's seeing, like, only people who are there at practice every day. Nobody's seeing what Labus is doing and thinking, wow, this kid's going to be so, maybe you go Padilla, but it's certainly not going to be a transfer. It's not going to be Carson Mann, and I would not bet on Joey Labus.
This is a similar question to what I hit you with last week when I asked, I wonder when the last time there's been a position coach or a coordinator fired. This would be my question for this week would be, when is the last time an incumbent quarterback at Iowa was benched? Like permanently benched for poor play. And
well, Jake Rudock. I mean, that's really the only example of that. He was
16,
15. He played in 13, 14, and was okay. I thought he was okay. People were really on Kirk about that because they wanted to see CJ. And I mean, Rudock moved on, and he went to Michigan and had a terrific year statistically. But it's a different situation because, Mark, I think both of those guys were both really good options. We forget how good Rudock was. Like, people laugh at that. Rudock was not bad at all. I'd kill for Rudock right now, Mark. Like if he could be Iowa's starter right now, that would be tremendous. And again, I bring up Cody Sokol, beginning of 2013. He went on to have a great career at Louisiana Tech. They had 3 really good quarterbacks on the roster after James Vandenberg moved along. So that would be the last time. Other than that, I mean, Jake Christensen was benched in 2008, and Stanzi never gave the job up. Jake Christensen ended up transferring, I think, to Eastern Illinois. So, I mean, that did happen, but you certainly can count those on one hand. Typically, you're going to have a starter. I mean, you're on the list: Stanzi, Stanley. We're seeing it so far. Vandenberg, Petrus. It just doesn't happen. And even we brought up during the season, Mark, every time that Padilla went in and played decently well. Padilla was not lighting the world on fire, but whenever he came in and played decently well, we were always reminded post-game that it was because Spencer Petrus was hurt. We didn't want to give anybody the idea that Spencer was being benched. So that just think about that for a second. That tells you Spencer is their guy as of right now. It's not Alex Padilla. It's Spencer Petrus. But you hope that perhaps the reason why Alex Padilla is committed to staying here this spring is because the coaches have sat down with him and said, look, I mean, and I know that's just words, but if they've sat down with Alex and said, look, we believe you have a great chance to win this job, then I would think that would give him some reason to stay, because Alex Padilla wasn't going to transfer and start at another Power 5 program. I don't think. Neither would Spencer Petrus. But I hope it's a wide open race. That's what it needs to be.
Iowa was 83rd in the nation in turnovers, meaning number 1 was best.
That's not very good.
Number of turnovers, 83rd.
Yeah, that's not very good, and that's, I mean, Kirk Ferentz he hates that, right? I mean, Kirk Ferentz is talking about, he's built on playing clean football. So, but see, that's also, I think, part of the problem, Mark. I think that's part of the reason why Iowa has been so pro Spencer Petrus, because I think he is more risk adverse. Now he got into trouble the games where he threw interceptions, but typically he'll make decisions. We saw it. He'll make decisions like he did against Wisconsin on that 4th down, where he'd rather throw the ball out of bounds than take a chance. And of course, that's just that one is just kind of an anomaly, because it's just so ridiculous. And hopefully, I mean, I give him the benefit of the doubt that he just didn't understand time and space. But Mark, you got to understand where you're at in the field, the circumstances. You're down 20-3. You have to know as a quarterback it's 4th down. Like it's the baseball analogy. Like before a play happens, if it's going to be if it's a grounder, know where to throw. I mean, it's a perfect example. Pre-snap, Spencer Petrus should know pre-snap. Hey, if I get pressured, I'm not throwing this ball out of bounds. I'm chucking it down, similar to a Hail Mary, and giving my team at least a chance to go make a play, as opposed to just throw it out of bounds and give the other team the ball.